Okay, so we do have a Birds of a Feather session led by Ian Miers starting in 1 minute. Is Ian on the call? All right, here. What's up,
Yep,
Ian?
I'm here. Hey, man.
I haven't seen you in such a long time.
Yep, I went off and got a real job. Well, I'm a professor at the University of Maryland. I'm not sure we say that's a real job, but it's a job.
It's a job, yeah. Oh my God, the Slack is blowing up. Let me actually advertise the. Oh wait. Yep. Thank you, Patrick. It feels weird saying Patrick. Thank you, Patty.
How's Maryland? Is it nice?
Oh, how's Maryland? It's yeah, it's nice. I mean, we weren't in person the entire year, so I really can just tell you that the Zoom works as well as anybody else's Zoom. But
Does it have good food there, like better than New York or?
there's only one place in the world that has better food than New York, and that's only if you really like Japanese and French. But it is good food. BC has, particularly the suburbs, have a huge amount of very good food. There's a
I went
huge.
there once and I had some like steamed crabs that we had to crack open. That was amazing.
Oh yeah, I mean that's the
Crabs all day
traditional
is what you.
traditional Maryland stuff, and then you can get the other thing BC is known for is Ethiopian food, which is really good. And then you can get pretty much like there's a large Thai population, Korean, Chinese, small Japanese population, a huge number of El Salvadorians. Most of the El Salvadorian restaurants pretend to be Mexican, which is a little funny. So you can get strange tacos or actual El Salvadorian food.
How far away are you from Baltimore?
So it's an hour. I mean, I live in DC,
Okay.
right? The University of Maryland is like literally just over the city-county line. It's not even like past the Beltway. So it's like a 20-something minute commute.
Okay, I think we should probably let Ian do introduce himself. Well, actually, that's my job. No, so Ian's actually an assistant professor at the University of Maryland, and he does a lot of work in real-world security issues and real-world cryptography. He's been sort of all around this space for a long time. So this is everyone's chance to ask him for some real-world advice on real-world problems or questions in general.
I can kick it off if no one else is courageous enough to do so. So I've seen Tornado Cash sort of rise up in sort of popularity in the last like 6 to 8 months, and I was wondering what your impressions are of it versus other products in the space.
It's actually a good question because the funny thing is I know nothing about it other than that it's a mixer and that it's risen up to do a bunch of stuff. In general, it kind of worries me because we know that there are a huge number of pitfalls just practically from Bitcoin mixers. There are also then a bunch more problems with, you can probably do huge amounts of statistical analysis to figure out what's going on, but nobody in academia does this stuff because it's not readily publishable. Like nobody would care and it's hard to get the data to do it, but huge numbers of sort of intelligence, security intelligence and analysis companies do that. And so I wouldn't really trust it. And then the added problem is Ethereum, the usual joke I make about Bitcoin is it's Twitter for your bank account. And it's pretty easy to figure out what's going on. But people in Bitcoin usually switch up their addresses pretty frequently, in part because Bitcoin addresses are pretty much useless except for sending money, and so you have no attachment to them. Ethereum has this whole rich ecosystem of things that are tied together. So if you use your same address for your Ethereum name system like entry, and your blog, and also making payments and also DeFi, there's a huge amount more information we can probably get about you and tie together. And that just makes this entire thing riskier. And we started to see things where people track who owns NFTs, or like, what was it? Vitalik selling all of his, there's this clone of Doge, which was like Shiba Inu coin or something. And there was this whole story of like tracking the money going around and selling it. And this was all something he described on Twitter, but I was reading this and going, people are going to start telling these stories about things where there is no external information. That's just from what's going on chain. So I think Tornado Cash is better than nothing, but probably won't hold up for that long.
I have a question.
Sure.
So, meanwhile, I was doing my taxes in May, and for crypto taxes, there's all these services to help to calculate the, the crypto-related taxes, and accountants have to use this software too, and most of them are hosted on cloud services.
Mm-hmm.
And the way it works, you connect, let's say, your Binance and exchanges via API keys. So it pulls all the information, and it has your public keys. So just going back to this idea that like it's like Twitter for your bank account. I don't know, when I was like looking at this, the implications I think are quite massive, because so I wonder if you have any thoughts on this, or if you're aware of these.
Actually, I hadn't thought about that one as being a centralized point of collecting data, but you're definitely right. That would definitely get it. The other one which happens is, so if you're at a large exchange, you have to run some kind of monitoring stuff to make sure your hot wallet keys don't get stolen or insiders don't move funds out. And that infrastructure is incredibly hard to write, and most places don't have the expertise, so they outsource it. And who they outsource it to, believe it or not, is companies like Chainalysis and Elliptic, and I guess Neutrino before they were bought by Coinbase. And the way they do it is by feeding in all of their outbound transaction flows. And so this now means that there is this data set, which is tagged of who's doing the accounts, because you need to do intrusion detection, from a lot of exchanges of exactly who's doing these transactions. And those companies have it, and I would be willing to bet don't have it that well segregated from the rest of their analysis flow data. So you can easily end up with, via that or via the tax stuff or via any number of other things, these just aggregated lists of who has what address and who's doing what in a way that won't be publicly visible, but will be purchasable. You can purchase the services from the companies that do this. And I think this is sort of akin to like location tracking, where, conceptually we all know our phones could track us, but we don't even, like I and researchers don't really think they are. And then you find out that like, yeah, they're advertising SDKs and all of your iPhone and Android apps that are reporting this data, and it's sold and can trivially be de-anonymized. There was a case, what was it, last week, 2 weeks ago, where a Catholic newspaper bought anonymized data for people who are using Grindr, which is a gay dating app, and used it to locate and de-anonymize a somewhat senior official in the archdiocese and forced them to resign because they got outed. And that's location data, but I think these kind of silos of things for cryptocurrency stuff will in 10 years, yeah, probably 5 years, cause similar kinds of problems.
Interesting. Yeah, in the case of taxes, it's like, the thing is, I mean, because some people first are worried, and if you use like TurboTax, let's say as an example of software, just for your normal, let's say your salary, you have to disclose a bit of, let's say will be your salary. But with cryptocurrencies, it's just your entire past history, current history, and future that is potentially available. Because once you have to leak the addresses you control, the public addresses you control, when you use these services. So anyways, I was quite concerned by that. And there's like very few alternatives that are not cloud-based, like almost like very, very few.
Right. I mean, the other one that several people pointed out, and I think we have seen leaks of, but not for cryptocurrency, is the the KYC, the know your customer data that's used for doing anti-money laundering stuff. These things are not always handled that securely either, because they're not like core banking data. And similarly for cryptocurrency exchanges, it's probably only a matter of time where we get these various centralized data stores. They get hacked, leaked, bought, or otherwise. And
because for instance, there was this leak with this data dump from the Ledger, the hardware wallet company, and people were freaking out. But imagine there would be a leak from, let's say, Coin Tracker, or because they also do portfolio tracking.
Yep.
Which is super useful because it can inform for also for, like, you know, smart investing decisions and all that. But let's say there's a leak and the name also are leaked. So then you have this bind. It's no longer that people know that you have a hardware wallet and where you to reside, where you live, but they know your name and all your public addresses you're controlling. This is like really scary, I think. It's not like, I don't know. And it seems no one to, because I've talked to quite a few accountants, and there's only one accountant I spoke with that he does not use these services, and because he has a background in software, and he was aware of that problem as an accountant, and he wrote his own software to do the calculations, you know. And obviously it's a bit, doing the taxes for these, especially if you introduce DeFi, it's kind of a mess as far as.
Yeah, it's a total mess. I mean, in general, as an interesting point, having used a couple of different accounting firms now, the security of any of their stuff is awful. The way it usually works for the large ones is they contract some accounting software at like $200 to $800 to $1,500 a seat, and that does their data storage. And these things have gotten hacked and ransomed, actually, not for cryptocurrency, but it's not any different, right? Similarly for law firms, like someone will hack into this thing, encrypt all their data, and they'll actually do two nasty things. One, they're saying, look, if you pay us, we'll give you your data back. If you don't pay us, we'll start publishing the data.
Yeah.
So it is definitely a major problem. This is the whole standard cybersecurity infrastructure things. And in general, you are safer when nobody has data about you.
Yeah.
But it's a software service model. I was about to say we could do some complicated cryptography to avoid this problem, but the actual answer is just run the software on your own computer. But
yeah, that's what this Rotkey, this one's a Python application. I think the team is in Berlin, Germany. So that's the only one I found. It's a desktop application, and you do all your stuff locally on your computer, and you can produce reports and
But this is the classic problem about cryptocurrency of like incentives and ecosystems matter. Like this works until, of course, you know, the people doing that can't make as much money or hire as much staff as the people doing the cloud service. And so 5 years from now, Rocky will still support the 5 things it is, but the fork of Uniswap and the SushiSwap into, you know, whatever comes next, like Tomago Swap, that won't be supported, and then you end up using this thing in the cloud and giving away all your data.
No, already they're quite behind, like in terms of like services and all that they can offer.
So I have another one of these open-ended sort of what do you think of questions. So another thing that I've seen deployed in the last 6 to 8 months is Starks are sort of becoming very popular. DYDX has been partnering with Starkware and has like a lot of, they're using it for their products. What do you think about that? And also, like, what do you see in terms of like the 2 to 3 year horizon for the future of privacy coins? And also, what do you think about private smart contracts? That sort of, you know, pie in the sky that no one's made any progress towards.
Okay. So in order, let's see. So Starks, from what I understand, are still used for proving things about like a whole sequence of transactions. And they're very good for that, but you need like a pretty beefy server to do it. And so the problem is, of course, the guy who generates a zero knowledge proof sees everything that goes into it. And so Starkware, I think, has been running, and you know, these things all have sequencers or DEX operators who see everything. So I don't really right now categorize them as privacy, unless you narrowly define privacy as just it doesn't go on chain. And I think that's going to stay that way for a while. they're quite useful. They're great for scale, but they don't do the privacy thing very well because they're meant for like bigger things. The second part of your question was the future of privacy coins. I don't know. They face some challenges with increased regulatory pressure from ransomware. Right now, ransomware actually isn't using Monero or Zcash or Dash. It's still all using Bitcoin. But if they ever switch over, and there's reasons to think now, given what the FBI did with dark sides, that there might actually be pressure to do this, then things are going to get a little tricky. And it'll be somewhat difficult to justify if that's the only thing using them, because none of these things have found uses in payments. I mean, Bitcoin hasn't found uses in payments yet. And so it's an interesting question, right? We clearly need privacy to avoid these problems that are clearly going to be issues like 3, 5, 6 years down the road. But right now, all of the harms are mostly hypotheticals. And so it's very hard to keep those up if you end up with a non-hypothetical downside, like hypothetical privacy harms, and then ransomware on the other side. I mean, is a challenge. Cryptocurrency in general is having problems with this. And you asked about privacy preserving smart contracts. Those I'm quite excited by. In fact, there has been a fair amount of progress on these. On the SGX side, Don Song has a company, Oasis Labs, also Enigma, which changed the name into something else, Secret. They went from MPC to SGX, is also out there. And then on the zero knowledge proof side, there is Aleo, which is actually a company I co-founded with the CEOs Howard Wu, came out of a paper we had called Zexi, which finished a $30 million round from Andreessen Horowitz and a couple of other places. And so there's definitely a bunch of things that are about to go live or are live right now. The question is, what business cases do they go for? Is it NFTs? Is it like some kind of DEX? And there, the jury's out. The question is, what's the product market fit? And these are enormously hard to predict. It's not clear. I mean, has anyone else seen anything cool in terms of privacy stuff? This is supposed to be like more of a roundtable than me just talking for an hour with no slides and no script and no presentation. Because you do that, you're just going to get sound bites from me that you could get off my Twitter feed.
That's not bad either. That's
well, sure, but you could just read the Twitter feed. I don't know.
Can you share your thoughts on Intel's JX and the problem having to trust Intel?
So, right, SGX.
Like it, okay with it too.
Well, sorry, what?
Sorry, I want to add. First, say like yes or no. Do you like it? And then you can explain why.
Oh, well, so I did two hats. As an academic, I think most of the papers that do SGX research basically are like, so computing is about removing trusted parties. And instead of doing that, we just said we're going to trust this microprocessor. And so don't really answer the hard questions. It doesn't make for the best or most interesting research. On the other hand, as an application, SGX's security is deeply exaggerated, right? We know we can break it if you have any kind of physical access, or even can just run software on the thing, right? It is pretty porous, right? And this is part of why I don't think it's a very good thing for like security research. But in industry, the thing that we always forget is that exactly how much security you really need is never as much as you think, right? We did this whole process of rolling out credit cards with that has a credit card number on it. I shouldn't hold that up. Credit cards with chips in them, and yet they're still done with signatures. And to like my cryptographer friends, especially the ones in England who are stuck with chip and pin, this was like mind blowing that in order to do this, but it works out fine. And so the question is, can you pick applications for SGX where it's enough of a roadblock to break it, even though we know you can, right? Much like we know you can like break into the door in your apartment if someone's motivated enough. Can you find applications where that actually makes a market difference? And I think you might. Those might exist. Yeah. And that's the question again with like things like Oasis. On the other hand, there are things where it's probably not appropriate to use it, like say Signal, which has a bunch of stuff where they use SGX for contact discovery, which is maybe okay, and some other things more recently, where it's like, you are setting yourself up where every single major intelligence service in the world wants to go after you, and it definitely doesn't hold up against that. And so don't do that.
Yeah, yeah.
So the real question for SGX is like, how much money is at stake and who has access, right?
Yeah.
And for things where that's small, and small maybe $10,000, maybe $100 million, it's not clear. It's probably not billions, that probably works. For things where the consequence of it getting broken is just like you get some more spam or a couple of bits of fraud, then it's probably fine.
Yeah.
For things where you break it and you say can get everyone's financial transactions for the entire world or everyone's private messages, that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, because if someone has physical access and has like, let's say a budget of like, let's say $300,000 or let's say $500,000, they buy an this ion beam microscope, and with a little team of experts who know how to use it, and then you can basically have access to root keys. That's my understanding.
Yeah, so you can definitely do that, but there's a whole class of software exploits. Just remote access now. You have to have root on the server. Actually, no, wait, that's a lie. You don't even need root. You just need userland access. But Daniel Genkin and others, there's a Spectre meltdown, cache out. I can't remember all the other names they came up with and the logos on the t-shirts, but there's a whole sequence of these, which basically abuse the fact that modern microchips, particularly Intel and to a lesser degree AMD's microchips, do not execute code in the way you think they do. And so there are like side channels you can use to pick up like what happened in an execution that you called out to SGX and then came back, and like just by running some code a couple of times, you can like pull keys out and pull data out. The way to think about it is, let's say you think back to when you were a teenager, your parents went out for the weekend, they left you at home and you tried to throw a party, and then you frantically try to clean up the entire house afterwards to like put everything back so they don't notice. And inevitably you screw up and you leave some stuff around and then they can figure out you had a party. That's basically what SGX does. And it doesn't put everything back. And in fact, it leaves a bunch of trash just sort of like slightly pushed under the couch. And if you go look, it's like, not just you have a party, we know exactly what you did. And yeah, here are the keys.
Okay, that's cool. Cool example.
So the one interesting question is, can you do better than this on future hardware, right? If you start building things from like purpose-built up software, does it get better? I mean, this is the usual answer that the Oasis folks give. It's like, well, yeah, SGX isn't good, but there's this whole like RISC-V thing that will have better stuff. And of course, is that just a thing you put in a pitch deck so VCs will fund you, or is it actually true? Time will tell. But certainly one could do better than x86. Albeit at performance costs, because speculative execution is kind of how modern hardware gets fast, and you definitely can't do that in these contexts.
So I wanted to ask you something, Ian, actually, and that is, so, now that like the last, I think, year or two, right, like there's been so much more adoption of coins from, just like non-tech people altogether. And, there is so much more regulation around on how your coins are used and sort of just tracking your coins. So like, as a matter of kind of managing expectations, what do you see as like a more practical promised land for where coins like a Monero, Zcash could and should aim to be as sort of, in the market of all coins, right? I mean, like at one point it was great that, we want privacy. And at some point I could see it being a very sort of, one of the top coins, but with regulation, do you see that as sort of a having to lower expectations, or you think it's still possible that it, it takes up a large share of the coin market in the future?
So I think, I don't think regulation's pose a unique problem. I think what is clear, and this is a thing we've been looking at adding to Zcash. I don't know about Monero. Certainly, I know there are a bunch of other proposals in other coins on Tezos and Cosmos. Is that you don't just want privacy for one coin. You want to have a shared privacy layer so that your various things can move around and you can have stable coins, for example. And so I definitely think the days of the single currency private blockchain are not numbered, but it's not going to take over anything. And in retrospect, it was probably naive to think it would. Maybe in 2013 or 2014, when you thought something might replace Bitcoin, but post DeFi, no. You're going to need something where you can move, DAI, USDC, Tether, Bitcoin, Zcash, whatever, all in the same privacy pool. And the good news is we know how to do that. The tech's actually not anything more complicated than what we already have. But I think that's where the ecosystem's moving. The question is really, does that end up on some chain that's specialized for privacy, or does that end up on some general purpose chain that happens to have smart contracts for privacy? And this gets into complicated questions of how efficiently you can do these things in smart contracts and who pays for gas, which we haven't resolved yet. There's sort of an interesting market competition going on there to some degree.
Yeah, and so with with how sort of DeFi has exploded mainly on Ethereum, and now we have roll-ups, and everyone's also moving on to those, right? Do you even envision a future in which sort of there will be a multi-chain sort of universe, or because it's so dramatically sort of cash is all in on Ethereum already, that we actually see a lot of these projects, and I mean, this is a hot take, and I'm sure it won't happen, but if Zcash simply deploys like a layer 2 over Ethereum, where you have privacy like that.
So I think it's certainly
it's impossible.
Well, no, nothing's impossible. And just speaking as sort of philosophical ideals, and also kind of how the chain works. There's nothing that would prevent you from just deciding, okay, we're going to literally take Zcash and all of the units of currency and put them on top of Ethereum and abandon our own underlying blockchain. You'd still have the same currency, everyone would still hold the same things. It would just be like the transactions happen on Ethereum. Or you could move to Cosmos or Tezos or probably not Binance Smart Chain. That'd probably be a bad idea. But conceptually, you could see this happening. I think the question is, how would you pick which one to move to, assuming you could get the performance to work? And I think the real problem is that it would be naive to assume that Ethereum is going to be the only thing in the future, because there's so many different competing approaches to scale and such that it's not clear who will win, right? Ethereum has this huge community, but for example, if the scaling plans went wrong, everyone could move to some other EVM compatible system which didn't make the same decisions, right? So there's definitely a risk, and these things aren't that sticky. It gets a little more complicated if you're going to move to something with some weird smart contract language like Cardano. Well, actually, it doesn't even have a working one, but or Tezos or whatever. But there certainly are like options for people to move, and so that doesn't mean Ethereum isn't the future, but it does mean that like it's not a foregone conclusion. People have to execute correctly and get capacity. And like as a hint, we already saw like things move partially to Ava. Binance Smart Chain is literally just the what if we did Ethereum but made it more centralized. And that obviously has limits for any number of reasons, but there is demand that could cause things to move, and there's also execution risk, right? Where you ship some bad updates and things. I will say that one of the, if you try to raise for a company right now, if you have some ideas you're deploying, the thing you get asked by every single VC and investor is, what's your scaling plan? And they don't mean for your tech, because whatever you're pitching is not necessarily like that complicated, but it's like whatever platform you're building on, how are you getting around the fact that they inevitably have scaling problems in 5 years, right? So like you're giving, these production growths of like, here, you should invest in this thing because in 5 years we might 10 or 100 or 1,000x or whatever it is. And the investors are like, great, let's assume you're right, but that requires that the chain you're building on has the underlying transaction capacity to happen. And they no longer believe that any of the current ones do. So then what?
Yeah.
And one answer is you bet on Ethereum and bet that their proof of stake hybrid, whatever scaling model works, and that's a totally valid bet to take, but it is a bet.
I have one question that's sort of going in the other direction. So you've been working on privacy for about 7 years now for cryptocurrencies.
Yeah.
Now that you've got a new job, you've got a real job, are you still going to pursue the cryptocurrency track, or is there other areas of privacy that you're interested in?
I've rather intentionally always spent about 50% of my time on cryptocurrency work and 50% of my time not. That probably would be about what happens going forwards. Right now, it's actually a little bit more biased towards not, simply because of the grad students I have and the interest in the project I had in mind.
And what are you working on now? Like, what's catching your interest?
The last paper I actually have that's up on ePrint was for payment detection in private certain cryptocurrencies. So it's probabilistic key scanning stuff. So that was cryptocurrency things. But the stuff I'm looking at now is application of ZK snarks to like fraud and abuse and anonymity for like credentials. So that's sort of the stuff that I'm interested in now. The other problem, of course, is it's a little, when you have grad students, it's a little fraught to tell them to go work on like problems in Zcash or smart contract privacy when I have companies that do both of those, right? Because it's a conflict of interest, even if you can run it past the conflict of interest committees at your university, because frankly, they're rubber stamp and they don't care. But there's a little bit of a like, hey, you're getting paid $25,000 or $40,000 a year, and I'm going to make you do this stuff, and yeah, no. It's a problem.
That's pretty interesting. Like, I guess there's one question as well. So obviously you're involved in several startups. How have you handled that with the university in the past? Like maybe you were like, because you were a postdoc, it wasn't as intense.
It doesn't become a problem. Well, I don't know about in the case of the University of Maryland, we are only 80% employees, right? So I have a day a week. I mean, it's aggregated over, but you have free time and you can do a bunch of stuff. So that's not a problem. And I think that's the case for most major universities. Things get trickier if you want to do an extended leave of absence. That is a thing. If you're on the academic job market, you should try to negotiate in advance because when you are sitting holding office in multiple universities is the only point you have leverage in that entire relationship, because that is not a thing with your department, it's with your dean. The other complication is intellectual property entanglements. And that gets nasty because if you're on federal funding, which you almost certainly are, anything you do that you would patent, if it's related to your funded grants, is owned by the university. So this can be a serious complication. Typically in cryptocurrency, it isn't, because the community tends to obscure patents eschew patents, excuse me, not obscure as in hide them. They just don't do them. And the source stuff is open source. So that's usually the tech transfer path. And at that point, it's actually all kosher.
Okay, but like that's to say for your past startups, universities weren't as concerned and they just ignored it. They were.
No, we never had problems. One of my co-founders at Zcash subsequently had issues with another one of his startups. And there was a lawsuit that was settled, but that wasn't over Zcash. That was over Starkware, actually. And that's Israel, which is Israel universities have always been notoriously picky about IP issues.
Yeah, I read about that. So basically now then you're basically focused on topics that your students are interested in, which is like credentials.
Yeah, and some other stuff. I mean, everybody kind of wants to do like to make a privacy coin. But the question is, what's the research dimension to that? And, what do you do that the other things haven't done?
I mean, there's one thing that came up recently when I was chatting to a company was obviously they're doing privacy preserving payments and they wanted for yield farming. Because obviously in Ethereum, lots of new projects bootstrap liquidity by releasing tokens to people who lock up collateral. But you can't really do that with a privacy coin because you lose your privacy.
It's hard. I've seen some proposals quite probably actually by the company you were talking about, which I don't know who they are. He's reviewing. But I've seen some proposals to do this where you stick some money in a pool, and you just sort of, you can get it to kind of work, but there's some leakage around it.
Is it an impossible problem, do you think? Like, I was trying to think about it, and
So I mean, it's actually a good question. Let's say, I mean, yield forming, you put money in a pool and then you get paid out for keeping it in that pool, right?
yes.
So you could do this pretty easily because you could prove that the money was locked up long enough and you just take out whatever you can prove is yours.
Okay, do you have to withdraw the exact amount, or could you just withdraw like small increments?
Well, if you wanted to do it completely privately, what you do is let's say you do this with Zcash, hypothetically, you lock your Zcash, so you put it in some special state that's inside the commitment. And then later you pull that out and you'd also go, I'm going to create out of thin air a new commitment to these yield tokens. And as proof that I'm authorized to do this, I'm going to say, look, I locked up this amount of Zcash for this many blocks. And so that would work. And that would give you privacy.
What was that again? So are you releasing the tokens back into the shielding pool then? Is that the idea?
Yeah. So you have to have a multi-asset shielded pool. And the observation is you just like holding your underlying currency, say Zcash, in a blocked state for a while, gives you the right, if you can prove you did it, to just mint the yield tokens. Right? You don't bother withdrawing from someone and saying, hey, look, I'm authorized. You just generate a zero knowledge proof that says I did the prerequisite, like held $10 for 10 days. So that would work.
Cool, because it would be minted in the shielding pool, and then you would
and then that would actually get you complete privacy.
Okay, you just get a student to work on that then, because I know that's a problem.
Yeah. Well, this is the problem. There's a major disconnect between problems industry and VCs are interested in, problems you can accomplish and advance a student's career, right? Because ultimately they want a PhD and an academic job. Or not. Maybe they just want a master's and to go make the next currency and shell it. In which case, it's fine, but it won't bother learning.
Can I spit out a question as well?
Sure.
Yeah, it might maybe a little weird, so bear with me. What I'm seeing is, so technology, or let's say basic cryptographic techniques for privacy are out there at least 20 years or so, like private set intersection and oblivious RAM. Recently, those succinct proof systems and authenticated data structures and all that kind of stuff. And still, we don't have a mechanism out there for price finding under total secrecy. So basically a market where a price of, let's say, a deal for token A, token B, or whatever, appears just out of thin air, but is provably correct. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah. What is the missing piece here? Why is it so hard to create such a thing? We have all those proofs of retrievability where you can prove that liquidity is there, but it's not visible somehow. It just appears. And so it must be possible to create a system that just spits out the current price of a trade or whatever asset it is without using oracles from the external world or whatever. It just appears emergent. Why is it? What is the missing piece here?
Well, the missing piece is a question of what you mean by privacy, because we know how to do this, to do like a DEX that's fully private. This was in the paper I wrote with Howard that turned into Aleo called Zexe, Z-E-X-E. But the problem is fundamentally markets don't work if they're entirely private, right? So when there's a market, right, we don't mean an individual transaction like Patty and I meet in the dark alley and trade some weird tokens for each other. The entire point of a market is price discovery. And for that to happen,
yes,
some amount of information has to be made public, right? Because otherwise nobody else has discovered the price. And
this
so
is something I don't understand, and I cannot accept. I have to say, I don't see a reason for that. A reason that like a natural constant or whatever. I don't see it. Why is it? I mean, we know emergent systems in nature everywhere. So stuff goes in, we don't see the stuff, but something emerges for everybody, a public information, just the price of something, but we don't see the inputs. And
sure, so you can do that. That you can actually do. We know how to do that. The problem is that you do have to reveal the settled amount, and you have to reveal the price and the price at least, and probably actually the supply. So
yes, the supply. The supply should be secret as well. So basically, the liquidity that's there should be secret as well. Should be a witness as well. And there are so many techniques, and I don't see really the good reason that answers the question: why is it not possible to create a system where the price is just emerging like out of thin air, out of nothing, and it's provably correct?
If you think of an exchange like order book, right? Like there's whatever they quote the market price. And that's if you sell, say, 1 share. But if you sell 1,000 shares, the market's going to slip, right?
Yes.
And so what that tells you is the market needs to know both the amount and something, and it's not clear exactly what, something related to the volume.
Yeah.
And so I think the issue here is not the cryptographic side of it. It's the economic side of it, of fundamentally what do you have to reveal. And I think the answer is, if Patty and I go into a dark alley, right, and make a trade, if you want that to be part of the market, you can't just tell the world the price that we settled on, because if it was for 5/10 of a unit, that's very different if it was for 50,000 units. So you have to tell you need to basically know what the bid and the ask are, right? The amount and the price. You can hide the identities, and we know how to do this. And this is a thing you can do.
Yeah. I know what you mean, but I still don't see like a natural law that says it's impossible, like an impossibility result. It's impossible that the price emerges out of thin air with all the participants and all the amounts and all the liquidity and everything. Every deal is sort of private, totally private, and still the correct price emerges for a particular point in time, of course, and is provably correct, and it's verifiable for everybody, so publicly verifiable. I still don't. I'm feeling like I'm missing some fundamental here, like an impossibility result or something, but I don't see it. It must be possible to have such.
If you have everybody online at the same time, you can all run a giant multi-party computation. We all put in your bids, and this is like auctions. There are multi-party computations.
Like an auction, right? Exactly.
You can run this. I mean, you literally do a second price sealed bid auction or a falling price, whatever. Or there was a paper from some people at IBM 20 years ago, I think, on like theoretically MPC for matching. And then at the end of it, what they comes up with is an allocation of who does what trades, and they just tell you what the change price and supply was in total. The thing is that requires everybody to participate. You can relax that by saying you don't have to participate, but then you have to trust somebody who did, because you're going to have to give them the orders you want to make. And at that point, then we start getting into a thing where it's just a market maker. Right? So you can virtualize the market maker and run them as an MPC process, and then it's as good as, do you trust that at least one or 2/3 or whatever the threshold is of the parties who are the market maker works. But sort of fundamentally, there will exist a set of people as such that if they all collude, they will know what happened. In the limit, if you make everyone participate, that's everybody in the market. But having everybody in the market participate online all the time is not feasible in practice, though it is feasible in theory. So from a theory side, it's like just make everybody do MPC, and then you get exactly what you wanted.
All right.
What you want is the impossibility in that middle ground of you have not everybody participate and somehow still get the properties of a system where everyone participates. And I think that's a general thing about multi-party computation, that it doesn't work that way. But not being an actual expert in MPC theory myself, I can't point you to the results. Nor do I know for sure if anyone actually went down this road.
All right. Yeah.
But it's a good question.
Yeah, we did, like, so I've been helping Andrew Miller and Yunchi, a PhD student, on this honey badger swap, where we use MPC to hide the amount in the liquidity pool and so forth. But it's exactly as like Ian is saying, is that then this falls back on your committee that is running the multi-party computation. Actually, and the liquidity providers are all kind of clients that are not necessarily running, that are not participants in the actual multi-party computation. So then the whole thing, the whole system is vulnerable to exactly what Ian is saying, is that if there isn't an honest majority amongst the multi-party, the servers running the multi-party computation, then they can collude, and then they will reveal the data.
Yeah. Plus, there's just a fundamental, like, it's not a technical problem with multi-party computation. And in fact, I think multi-party computation is both very important as research and will get applications. But like, as security people, we tend to have this thought of like, okay, step one, there's a problem of, there's this thing that has a single trusted party, like a market maker, and people don't trust them. So solution, we'll have 3 parties and you only have to trust one of them. That's the typical thing MPC does. In practice, what that actually reads as, originally as a business, your problem was find one person everybody trusts. And now you have to find 3 people that at least some subset trust at least one of them. And that actually is harder in practice, because you've got to find somebody who's willing to run the thing 3 times over and incentivize them to do it. And so there are points where that's appropriate and points where it's necessary and points where it's a good idea, but it is actually in practice sometimes harder than just saying, look, trust this guy. Yeah, you don't really have a reason to, but you don't have a choice. So either, you know, participate in the market and hope it works out until you learn otherwise, or pound sand. And I think that's part of where we haven't seen a lot of these multi-party computation things set up, particularly because it can multiply your regulatory risk in a certain sense, because now there are more entities that could do something shady or be in some jurisdiction that, you know, cares. So for DeFi, it's a mess.
Are you aware of the, well, this is a multi-party computation, and I know very little about it, but there's these 2 works, like one's called Fluid MPC and the other one is Yoso, You Only Speak Once, where they have this sort of dynamic membership where you can have like, basically your committee is not static. So it's like, you could have like, in Fluid MPC, they kind of transfer the state of the ongoing multi-party computation to kind of new committee members. And in Yoso, they have this sort of like idea that it's a bit like this, basically you only need to send a message once. If you participate in the protocol, you only send a message once and you can disappear forever and not participate anymore. So you're just like kind of executing roles. Anyways, I don't know that much about it, but it looks interesting.
So that actually sounds really cool, and I haven't heard of it, but it seems to be the logical extension of like Algorand's consensus idea.
Yes, exactly. That's this. Yeah.
The challenge, of course, which isn't the case in Algorand, is if at some point you ever transfer to a dishonest committee because someone managed to infiltrate, you get into a problem. And no doubt that the paper has a theoretical model in which they have to assume this is impossible, and in fact should do that to be able to get proofs. But how you realize that in practice, right? Like, if you did this with Bitcoin style miners, right? Somebody turns on a mining farm and all of a sudden, 51% attacks the thing. It's one thing if you can alter the chain for a couple of blocks. It's another thing if all of a sudden you get like the secret keys to whatever the, DAO is or something. So it sounds interesting, but you might have to be careful about where you use it. And it doesn't answer the related question of how do you keep secret state? Because the fundamental problem with an order, an exchange, is they have to have an order book. They have to know the supply to be able to tell you what the prices are. And so no matter how you move from community to community to community, some collection of people actually have to have collectively amongst them, even though an individual person can't read it, has to know what the total market supply and history of trades is.
Okay, sure, yeah. So you mean if you would freeze time, you take a snapshot at some point, you'll have a fixed number of members.
Yeah.
committee, and if that committee turns out to be corrupt or whatever, then they can collude together and reveal the state, right?
Yeah, they can get it. So it's another way of saying the advantage of these dynamic sort of like Algorand style, like your people are constantly moving, is that it's harder to hack them. It's harder to DRS them. And that is potentially significant.
Sure.
But we haven't seen hacking or DRS of NPC services in large part because we haven't seen NPC services, because the first problem is you have to find people anyone trusts to run them.
Yeah.
And that does not solve that problem. In fact, it makes it worse because it's dynamic. So cool hack and should get used somewhere, but again, has actual operational problems, right? I mean, this is sort of a funny thing, right? Like what trust is a funny thing that people don't always anticipate what happens, right? When we did Zcash, right, you have to generate these setup parameters for the zero knowledge proofs, and if somebody generates them in a bad way, then they can print potentially billions of dollars. They can't de-anonymize people, but they can print billions of dollars. So we had to go through this whole ceremony of having multiple people participate and destroy their computers. The first one, and then the second one, it was just like 100 some odd people, and right? And for the most part, that problem went away, right? Like for Zcash, it's a bit of FUD that still follows us, but for people who did it subsequently, because they didn't have all the Bitcoin people worried about it, those kind of assumptions have been fine, right? Despite the fact that it's cryptocurrency and it's supposed to be trustless. And now people worry about, like, is your wallet code correct? Did your smart contract have a bug in it? Did you get scammed into moving your tokens into some new yield forming thing that actually is just like a straight up, they take your money, right? These are all things that happen. So it's weird.
Well, if no one is asking a question, I'll ask more of a philosophical question, if you don't mind, Ian.
Sure.
So, and that I saw this one interview with Timothy Seamay, right? One of the author of this Cypherpunk Manifesto, where he was saying that, yeah, if we live in a world where everything is, say, private, so you cannot know like who's doing what and who are the bad guys and so forth. And his answer was kind of very short and concise, and he just said, well, that's it. We have to deal with it. It's like that. So basically, he thought that it's better to have a system in which we respect each other's privacy at the expense of, yeah, having a few bad guys or some bad guys that we won't know what they are doing and cannot catch them or whatever. If I summarize that, that's my understanding, you know, of his position. So I wonder, yeah.
It's a little more nuanced than that.
Yeah.
Because I mean, the standard thing is like no system in reality is perfect, right?
Mm-hmm.
Criminals get away with stuff. There's huge amounts of money laundering, like pre-Bitcoin. And in fact, most money laundering happens via the US banking system. But things can get easier to happen such that they become a real problem. So ransomware is a good example of this, where like, because cryptocurrency is uncensorable, right? It has nothing to do with privacy. Right? Even if you know exactly who's making the payments and you know that it's a ransomware payment, in fact, the FBI does, right? Because you can't censor it, you get this incentive for people to start hacking into things and shutting things down, right? And that can have real consequences, like the Colonial Pipeline hack, where there were gas shortages, and then actually people who got killed because they, you know, hoarded gas, actually in like Florida, where the pipeline didn't go, so it wasn't a problem, and then like it set on fire and burned the minivan. So you can't have things go wrong, and so it's a little like blithe to say, well, that's just it, because things can get worse. But
Yeah.
I do agree with the point that we don't really have an alternative. You can't live in a world where everything is public.
Yeah.
In particular, because one might naively think that if you lived in a world where everything is public, everybody would have transparency. We'd know what our politicians did, and you know, the world would be a better place. But that's not true, right? You can still obfuscate what you do. You can still hide stuff, and people in positions of authority and power will do that, and then selectively recognize the ability to disclose things against other people, right? Like imagine what happens if you're an up and coming politician who wants to reform the system. You don't like the prime minister in your country, and you run against him. And you don't know that he's having an affair because he's, been doing this for a long time and, knows how to cover his tracks and controls the security apparatus. But he knows that you're having an affair. And so he dumps it at you at the worst possible time of the election and you lose. Right? This is a thing that happens, right? In fact, watching the news about the NSO group and the Pegasus malware, it's pretty clear that they've been selling this to various people in governments to spy on their opposition and do exactly that kind of stuff, right? And yeah, the opposition people could also buy malware and spy on other people's phones, but they're not in a position where that will really work. And so you need privacy because otherwise technology will be a way to reinforce, once somebody who's a bad person gets into power and wants to abuse it, they can, and it's a lot harder to get out from under them than it is for you to use the technology to help.
Yeah, it reminds me, there's this, I don't know, ZeroMQ?
Yeah.
This messaging library. So Peter Hingens, who was the kind of leading that project, wrote this book, Culture and Empire, I think, The Digital Revolution. And at the beginning, he explains how civilizations and all that evolved such that, let's say if we're talking about, let's say, privacy technology, it's like a privilege. It's in the hands of a few. So in your exact example, that someone is advantaged because they're capable to hide their tracks, right? But eventually, like as things evolve, like the tools to do that, if you want, falls in the hand of everyone, the majority. And then the people in power will realize, and maybe they use it in a way that the people in power had not anticipated. So now and what the people in power try to do now is try to put all kinds of rules and limitations and constraints to prevent them. But they think it's almost kind of too late because now they didn't know that they would use it in such a way. And it creates this cycle, this evolution that now something new emerges, new technologies, and it's a kind of very interesting perspective.
Yeah, so that's the hope. The pessimistic way of looking at it is that technology lets you do many things at more efficient scales. One of them we hope is privacy. The one that we definitely know you can do is also like authoritarian monitoring of people, right? Yeah. You can't really have a police officer in every house and every street corner monitoring all your citizens. You can't actually arrest anyone who says anything in a pub that's critical of the king. But due to the magic of machine learning and surveillance cameras and ubiquitous technology, we know you can, and governments do this to your entire population, right? And so it means that it's a lot easier to run an authoritarian system.
Right? I agree.
And so if you're ever in Berlin, you should go to the Stasi Museum. The Stasi were the state police in the former German Democratic Republic, which was communist East Germany. And the amount of effort they went to basically suppress democracy and people fleeing to the West was crazy. And in the end, it cost a huge amount of money and was not quite effective. But they'd bug people's houses. They'd monitor everywhere goes. And they went to all this effort that basically you can get from anybody's phone now. And we live in a world where if you forget your phone or the battery goes bad, you're just anxious about it. You actually feel bad and you actually want to get this thing to work and have your own. They're incredibly useful to society and I'm glad we have them. But this is a tracking device that can listen to everything you say and tell you about everywhere you've moved and everywhere you've gone and everyone you've met with. And in the hands of the wrong person, that will make it a lot harder to have your, democratic government. And that's also true of financial data. In fact, it's more so true of financial data. You might leave your phone at home. Like if you're really radical about it, it becomes bad enough. But you can't go through society not buying things, right? Not having lunch with your friends, not getting the metro or getting gas to go somewhere. That is not, in the societies we live in, not a thing that will work.
Yeah, that's why if you buy a coffee and it's a taxable event, right? In the US, buying coffee with crypto, it's a taxable event. So that means you need to report that to taxes.
Yep.
So that means if you're using a service that has the potential of being hacked or leaking all your cryptocurrency related events, you're really this is a lot of information. It's like it's no. Anyways, that's yeah.
Yeah, it's a problem, and this gets even worse when you look at centrally banked digital currencies, which is the topic I just keep forgetting about because it's so mammothly weird. But multiple governments, some of whom are quite nasty, are looking at building and exporting these things, where it's like they want to supplant Bitcoin, and very well may succeed because it's stable. Well, not supplant, but get used in other niches, and then they'll have all this financial data on everybody. And it's kind of terrifying.
Hey, Ian, good to see you again. It's been a while.
Yeah, been a while.
I missed you.
Yeah.
Yeah, just off the wall question on quantum computing. Where does it stand now with respect to breaking cryptography solutions, and how come we don't hear about state actors, nefarious state actors using it to steal billions of dollars?
So there are two answers to that. My understanding is that quantum computing for breaking cryptography has been 10 years out for the past 30 years, and it's still 10 years out for the past 30 years, which means it's more so like 50. You wouldn't, that said, if somebody had state actors to do this, right, the amount of money in R&D you'd have to put into that, right, you wouldn't use it to steal money. You'd use it to spy on other countries' communications. Yeah. And that would not leak because signals intelligence organizations the world over are mostly pretty good at keeping quiet what their actual sources and methods are. Even if you look at like the Snowden leaks, they didn't really remove that stuff. So I don't think anybody's doing this. None of the popular science says it's possible yet. We're a massive number of years away. But that said, if the Chinese Ministry of State Security or the U.S. National Security Agency or British GCHQ was doing this, you wouldn't know that.
Cool. I have another question for you,
Sure.
Ian. A couple of years ago, the topic of cryptovirology has been a big one. But most recently, I never heard about systems that use cryptography to leak secret information. It's like comparable with the dual EC DRBG standardization and stuff like that. But you never hear about it in the real world. Does it mean they don't exist, or it's impossible to see a smoking gun with this kind of technology?
So dual EC DRBG was actually used to do this, right? Deployed, not just
yes, but it was, that one was my example. That was the last big thing we ever heard about. But the more dangerous stuff is like a signature algorithm that uses public keys that transport private information, for instance, stuff like that. It's even more dangerous.
We have seen, there was a good paper on ePrint a couple of months ago that confirmed what actually was basically known and acknowledged, that one of the encryption standards for, I don't think it was 4G, I think it was 3G or LTE, the like custom stream or block cipher was intentionally weak to be breakable by intelligence services. And in fact, ironically, I think not just like the Americans with giant supercomputers, because it was like an international standard and everyone wanted to be able to do it, and the NSA can afford 2 good computers and no one else can, so it's weaker than that. So we have seen a couple of these where intentionally weakened crypto standards, but it's somewhat rare because you have to have some serious cryptographic expertise to do it, and the only people who do are nation states and intelligence services. They do it occasionally. They've done it for mobile phone standards. They did it for dual EC DRBG. I don't think we've seen much more of that. And I would imagine, given how dual EC DRBG blew up in some people's faces, at least the NSA will think twice about doing this for a couple of years until they get the lesson learned and inevitably do it again.
I see.
So I will hop in here just to say that that at least for the official time length of this session, it is over.